What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Phil Randazzo of American Dream U. You can check him out at americandreamu.org. Phil, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the Veteran Entrepreneur Series, we had Winning the Apprentice with Kelly Perdue. I know you know Kelly, actually, of Moonshots Capital. Also, Charles Moyer, founder of Badass Beard Care. And he talked about expanding his business. We had Michael Eldridge, of the founder of Safety Glasses USA, and Mike McKim, co-founder of Cuvée Coffee. So check those out. Just some amazing stories of, not only the hard things about entrepreneurship, but veteran life and some of the challenges and things they had to overcome to get there. Before I introduce Phil, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that in two ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. So we do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution production. Number two, we're an easy button for our company's gifting. We make gifting, staying top of mind for clients, simple, seamless, and affordable. You just send us an address list of your people. We send a campaign of gifts for them for years to come. Phil, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free as possible for companies to build amazing relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and also send them sweet treats in the mail. So check it out at rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Phil Randazzo. He founded American Dream U in 2003. American Dream U is a nonprofit that's helped more than 19,000 military members, civilians, and entrepreneurs successfully navigate life transitions. And they do this through world-class education, mentorship, and entrepreneurial training. They've supported thousands in moving from service, or I guess what Phil calls like stuckness sometimes, into a purpose-driven career and venture. And after more than 2,000 one-on-one conversations, Phil actually discovered a common thread that something could be hidden in our subconscious that often holds us back. And so, Phil, thanks for joining me.
Hey, appreciate you, Jeremy. It's awesome.
Let's start off and just talk about, I've heard about American Dream U for many, many, many years through, some of the past speakers like Brian Kurtz and Jordan Harbinger and many other people. But just tell people about American Dream U and what you do. And I'm going to pull up the site as you do that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, all those guys are just amazing, and we've been super blessed with phenomenal individuals who have been willing to give up their time to come and share at military bases. And so what we discovered, Jeremy, and it was in 2012, that transitions can be difficult, right? And in the military, I'm not a veteran, I want to make that very clear, but a lot of conversations is that some of their future endeavors are chosen for them, right? Based on their skills, where they live, what they do. They have a very rigid routine especially when they're getting ready to deploy for any type of military situation. And so what we found is that when they're getting ready to leave the military has great people running an okay program, the transition program, but they're kind of siloed in a box, right? So if you do logistics in the military, they suggest you do logistics when you get out. If you do whatever it is, tech, cybersecurity, you've got these backgrounds that allow you to sit in a basement and listen to chatter and make decent money. But is that what they really want to do, right? And I'll give you a quick story. I was at Fort Benning, Georgia with Brian Kurtz. We're having a conversation around what's next? And there was this big job fair, and JBL Hunt was like, yeah, we're paying these young soldiers 50 grand to come out and drive trucks. I was with a young Army Ranger. His name is Trevor Shirk, owns a great business right now. I've kept in touch with him, for close to 15 years. And he literally said, you put a guy who's driven a truck, right, overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever, he's going to blow his effing brains out, right? Because you're just going to put him in that same situation. And so the guy from JBL Hunt was just stunned. And I remember Brian Kurtz just kind of looking around like we were always kind of an awkward moment. But that's just what they feel is the best for these individuals. And so
I
we've
see the
uncovered,
logic, right? I mean, this is, you had these skills and keep doing it.
yeah, right. And so through the help of a guy and a good friend named Clay Bear, I don't know if you know Clay, he's a brilliant marketing guy, spoken at, I don't know, a dozen different events. We sat down and kind of whiteboard and we're like, okay, what if we allow them to choose their own adventure? Like, what's next for them? So we created this great option, right? If you want to be an entrepreneur, we can help support you. We've had, everyone from combat flip-flops to grunt style to go ruck to Black Rifle Coffee guys, right? Like you can learn from some of the best entrepreneurs on the planet, but there's something holding them back from allowing them to take that quote risk, right? Like I remember we were at the Pentagon and they were saying, listen, if these guys want to become an entrepreneur, they have like a 4% chance of making it, right? So they're already putting it in those that want to become an entrepreneur in their minds that over the next 5 years, you have a very small percentage of a chance of making it. So we want to enter that conversation before they have that conversation. Does that make sense, Jeremy?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about combat flip-flops for a second.
Yeah. So Griff is the founder, 275 Ranger guy, awesome individual. I'm not sure how I met him. He was referred. He got out of the military and he's talked publicly about that. And he said that he found some addictions to help him kind of deal with what transition looks like. And so he also said that the Army was no longer, paying him to work out. So he got out of shape, gained a ton of weight, had some addictions. As he and I have talked about, he was trying to escape his world, not the world. And one day he woke up and we were scheduling, he was going to come speak and he sounded different. I'm like, hey, Griff, you sound different. He goes, yeah, I did a meditation today and I'm happy. And I'm like, all right, if we can figure this out in the next 5 minutes, why you're happy off of a meditation, well, it ended up being, you read a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I had just come back from a Dr. Joe Dispenza. We spent probably 2 hours on the phone talking about how to rewire our thoughts and be able to create something new. And he is an incredible individual. And he actually in combat flip-flops was on Shark Tank and ended up getting a deal with Mark Cuban. So he's partners with Mark Cuban. And so like I said, we've been blessed to have some incredible entrepreneurs. Like you're looking at here at Scott Mann, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, Green Beret. He has a play called Last Out. And he has found healing through sharing, through storytelling, right? And that's a healing process, right? You're a doctor and you get people on your table when you were fully practicing. And they had all this stuff stored in their body and they had no way to release it. And one of the ways that Scott has shared with people is releasing it through storytelling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Too woo-woo?
No, I mean, I love when you talk about this because I've heard you talk in some other videos and the old Phil, I don't know how far back we need to go, would have dismissed this as like, this doesn't work. I mean, listen, this is, I come from the chiropractic universe. So like, there's a lot of stuff I've heard that most people would think is even more kind of out of this, woo-woo than, but there's the varying degree there. But what flipped in your mind at what point where you're like, okay, like I need to start visiting this stuff and looking at some of these things where maybe I would have thought, oh, this is woo, this isn't for me, meditation, storytelling, this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, great question. I think it was 2016. I was kind of in American Dream U in the transition space pretty strong. And I was showing up in one way when I was publicly facing, another way when I was by myself, and another way around my family, right? And I took my wife, who I've been married almost 34 years now, I was taking her for granted. And what happened, Jeremy, is that my whole self-worth was based on how well I was doing, comparing that how well I was doing to how old I was, right? And I had this big delusion of time. I should be further along than I am, right? And I should be doing much better than I am based on my time. And
I've
so,
never thought that, Phil, for myself. Never.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so what I uncovered was, and my beautiful wife, she's like an angel. She was born into this world knowing she had to deal with me. I had literally become Jeremy, a dog no one knew they could pet. Right? I'm a big guy, 6'4", 6'5". At the time I was 255, and I was a man's man, and I was looking for reasons to get angry, right? The person in front of me didn't use their turn signal, angry, wanted to choke him out, right? And so when you're a dog no one knows they can pet, if I had a good day at work, I'd roll over and let my family pet me. If I had a bad day at work, watch out, I would chew their face off, not physically, but mentally, right? Like I was having a really difficult time. And when I've shared that story with a lot of veterans, they're like, dude, you're in my kitchen, right? Like we're all spun up and we just got this anger inside of us. We don't know how to do it. And so my wife basically said, 80% of the time you're a great guy, 20% of the time you're unpredictable. I don't think I can take that anymore. So I had to right? I had this big awakening. And the other realization I had, Jeremy, is that, they say we have this one and only life. Well, I was making her one and only life miserable. Like she was in flight or flight. So that's when I started getting a little woo woo and seeing people behave in such a way that I wanted to behave. And I was surrounded by 400 amazing American Dream U speakers. Some of them behind the scenes were a certain way, and some of them in front of the camera were a different way. And so I really was looking for those individuals who were happy for the sake of being happy, not tied to any comparison or game. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm in EO Entrepreneurs Organization. I feel like with our forum group that comes up over and over again, kind of what you said. And at least I'll speak for myself of like, I always think about that, right? Okay, based on how old I am, should I be further? I always think I should be further along than I am in various aspects, right? I'd love to hear what you did, right? So you made this realization. I feel it's hard to change, right? Because I've been a certain way for decades. So I'm curious on that. I do want to say one of my friends who has one of my entrepreneur friends who has road rage, I read them this quote. This is my favorite quote by George Carlin. I don't know if you've heard this quote, but it says, have you ever noticed that anybody driving slower than you is an idiot? Anyone going faster than you is a maniac. So that's, I sent that to him. He laughed because he's definitely has some road rage. But talk about what are some of the things you did to put in place? Because again, you're surrounded by all these amazing entrepreneurs. You've had a lot of entrepreneurial experience over the years. What did you do to then go, okay, I had this realization of taking my life for granted and maybe, spending less time or more time on certain things. What did you do?
Yeah. Well, one thing is that I had this awakened moment, Jeremy, that I wasn't looking for a cure. I was looking for relief. So I was part of, Joe Polish Genius Network and Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach and Mastermind Talks and blah, 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 like all these great things, been to all these workshops. I'd get super excited, Dr. Joe, Lipton, and then I'd come home and I'd just get triggered. And it just wasn't working. And so what I realized was I was just looking for relief. And for me to go to events, for me to go to workshops, I got that relief. I was in a community. No one knew my backstory. They didn't know I just lost my shit with my kids and my wife and all this kind of stuff. And so I could kind of be myself in a way, but not myself. And then the cure to me was, I don't think we can ever fully get a cure, was to integrate what I had learned before jumping into the next thing. And I know people, and I've worked with a lot of people where they're just running from one relief to another relief to another relief and never integrating. And the biggest thing I learned, Jeremy, was that I had to dissolve everything that wasn't me. And there was a lot of things that I was still living in this context that I'll give you a very quick example. So never asked a girl out in high school, super low self-esteem, right? Like I had to use my humor and some girls thought I had pretty eyes. Like I had to go for anything to try to get attention. Like it wasn't me. And I met my wife in college. We dated for a while. We ended up getting pregnant because that's what you do when you're in college. You don't have any money. She was the oldest of 8 kids, the most religious Catholic family on the planet. And I thought that she was only with me because of her religion and the fact that we had a kid. Anything she did to show me love or connection, I was like, no, you don't. You're only doing this because of your religion. No, you don't. Right? There was always something tied to why she was doing what she was doing. And so my belief running around was I wasn't needed, I wasn't wanted, and I was a burden. It wasn't conscious, it was unconscious. So I was running around trying to get attention, foot on the gas, all along when people gave me attention. I'm like, no, you don't mean it. And so I had to just understand that that wasn't true. She was with me because she loved me and she saw behind all of that nonsense. Does that make sense?
100%.
Right. And so all these people are great. Whether we partnered with Tony Robbins last year, we did some in-person military veteran events. It was amazing. And, we're jumping around, we're having this great connection. And then the guys fly home on a Sunday. And then their wife tells them, why didn't you take the trash out on Wednesday before you left? And they fall right back into their old patterns. Right. And they immediately, all these great wirings they had, it goes right back to where they were. So I've always been curious is how do we keep the fresh snow on the brain so that we can, have the awareness and build our own tracks versus all these tracks that, it's our parents left us furniture in our room, in our head. It's just there. And we're trying to put in new furniture and there's no room. So we need to remove the old furniture, the beliefs, right? Like I know I was put on this planet, Jeremy, because my dad, sweet guy underneath everything, but Sicilian, born in Sicily, angry, violent, everything. My grandfather, I heard, was even worse. Great grandfather, even worse. And so I believe I'm here to break that chain of anger, of violence. And my great great grandkids, I had this conversation with Greg McEwen, who wrote a great book called The Essentialism. And he talks about our great great grandkids who won't know our names, but they will inherit who we are. And I don't want, right, my great great grandkids not to know my name, but inherit the anger, the resentment, all those type of things. And I saw it in one of my kids, actually in all my kids in different ways, and I could see it. And that broke me. That was part of the change. And I couldn't tell them how they should be. I had to show them how they should be.
What did the integration look like for you then?
One is, for me, the big thing, Jeremy, is I was always trying to get there. And there is no there. I was already there, right? Like I'm not as successful as Tim Ferriss, and we've had, 7 billionaires. Grant Cardone has spoken a handful of times. Like all these people, right? They're running around their private planes, and I'm praying to get an exit row at Southwest just so I could have a little extra leg room. And it was just I was trying to be somewhere, and I just came to the realization is that we're all already there. We just have to recognize it. And for
So
the
it's that mindset, that self-talk for you. When those things come up for you, that's kind of what you tell yourself.
Yeah. And I think I heard this from James Altucher. It's like, we got to just, when these crazy thoughts get in our mind, it's like not useful, feel not useful. And I could tell you, Jeremy, like I could go from zero to complete dark thoughts very quickly. Like sometimes it scares me. Now I have the awareness to understand them, but I could go from, someone touches one of my kids and not only am I going to make them disappear, but I make them suffer for 5 years. Like, and I'm like, wait, how did I even come up with that thought? Does that right. Pretty dark.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm the only one. Maybe no one in your audience has dark thoughts, but I
highly doubt that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually was just listening to Gino Wickman's book, Shine, and he really goes into his dark past. Actually, it's way different from Traction. So I had Gino on the podcast talk about Traction and Mark Winters and Gino Wickman. Mark Winters talking about rocket fuel, but this is a way different book. This is kind of what you're talking about, and he goes deep into his past and uncovers some of the stuff that you know what it was like inside of his head.
Gino's awesome. I've gotten to know Gino a little bit, and he's changed everything with EOS and all that. I'm excited to hear about that because most people don't get a look behind the curtain. And I have a book coming out um, soon. Soon. I keep making these final changes. I just like because I'm worried about what
By the
people are.
time people listen to this, maybe it will be out. Can you say what the title is?
Yeah, it's less you, more life. I think it's now or becoming available because I was never available. And so I'll get you that. I'll get you the title. I've got a
Yeah.
whole bunch of websites that are, blah 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 blah. But it's again, it's a short book. It's got some great stories of myself, people I've worked with, and it really talks about the same thing. Like we need to wake up and realize that it's a blessing just being here, right? And not only blessed to be here, but like what a gift to be born in this country.
Will people be able to check it out on American Dream U
Yeah, it'll be
dot
on
org or yeah,
yeah,
okay.
it'll be on
What's a
AmericanDreamU.org.
favorite story from the book
Oh
for you?
gosh. So I added this recent story. Um, I'll give a story about someone else, and then if you want to give a story about this. So we partnered with Tony Robbins, and we had some platinum members. You know what a platinum member is at Tony Robbins? You pay like 150K, and you get to hang out with Tony, and you do all of his classes in like 18 months, and it's like a big deal. And this Marine walks in. I had 9 combat veterans stay at my house, which I probably should have given my wife a little bit more notice before they showed up. But he's like, I had post-traumatic stress and Tony cured it and all this kind of stuff. And he's, this big buff 40-year-old Marine. And I'm like, amazing. And we're all jumping up and down in my office and having this great thing. And my intuition said, hey, dude, like, does any of this post-traumatic stress still show up when you're at home, right? He's an attorney. And he goes, yeah, yeah. And I go, how's your wife and your 4 kids with that? Oh my gosh, my wife is just she forgets about the kids. She's so hands-on. She's with me. She pays attention to me, all that kind of stuff. And I said, interesting. I said, tell me about your childhood. And he's like, sir, I'm not tracking what this has to do with childhood. This was all Iraq, like all these deployments. And I go, talk about child. He goes, well, I have a twin brother. I go, interesting. I go, what's he doing now? And he goes, well, he had a botched surgery when he was 3, and he's been paralyzed from the neck down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how tragic. Like, how'd you deal with that? Like, what was your thought when you were a little boy running out? I knew my parents had to do what they had to do. I'm like, that's not how a little boy talks. Like, and we came to the conclusion, Jeremy, that his needs didn't matter. Right. And so I said, how is that showing up in your life now? And he says, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I said, well, you told me 20 minutes ago, Tony Robbins healed your post-traumatic stress. And I go, and now you have these episodes weekly. How is it showing up? And he goes, oh my gosh. And I said, well, maybe you should consider when you're sick, you get attention from his childhood. And he just literally starts tearing up in my living room, right? And so I'm looking around like, holy, what's going on? And these other guys are like, I'm worried he's going to choke me out and throw me out the back window. But he came to the understanding that he equated unconsciously, it wasn't his fault, that being sick, you get attention. And I'm not saying what he went through wasn't traumatic in Iraq and all those type of things. So these are the type of things that typically from childhood, they just get buried, right? And then the other awakening I had for those that are in the military is that the first day of boot camp, so he had all these things like my needs don't matter, my needs don't matter. He goes and he does all these things. And well, the first day at boot camp, what do they tell you? If you don't get this right, someone could die. Someone could get injured, right? Serious business. So now all of a sudden their brains equate to not doing something right to being dangerous. So unconsciously they're running around. How do I transition out of the military? This is the first time I've been married. I have kids. So all these thoughts unconsciously go through their mind, and that prevents them from doing whatever they want to do, right? Because they're afraid they're not going to do it right. So those are a couple stories I have in the book, and it's a human issue. It's not a military issue, Jeremy. You know this. You've worked with thousands of patients probably. It is a human issue.
Really powerful. Yeah, we'll have to, if you are listening to this, it's probably out. Go to americandreamu.org, check out the book. I'd love to hear, Phil, the evolution of American Dream U, the stuff that you offered when you first started, because I know it's evolved throughout the years, and then what it looks like now. When you first started the idea, talk about the services that you were offering at the time and walk me through that.
Yeah. So we started in 2003 randomly. I wanted to have a pro troops rally, right? We had these 18, 19-year-old boys, men and women out there serving. And so I had this pro troops rally. I had 4,200 people show up to my office parking lot, which was insane. I knew there was some pent up. And so the first 12, 13 years of the organization, we helped the wounded and their families. So people are all aware of Wounded Warrior Project right now. When we started working with them in 2005, there was nine dudes filling backpacks, sending them to Germany. So I ended up creating these wristbands, these camouflage wristbands that said defending freedom on them. We ended up sending about 550,000 to Iraq and Afghanistan. And then any nonprofit, Wounded Warrior Project, Fisher House, Marine Parents, all these, I would send them the wristbands for free. They would sell them and keep 100% of the proceeds. So I was not a veteran. I didn't want anyone thinking I was making money off the veterans. So I thought, okay, how can I take my resources and 6X them, right? So I would pay 44 cents for this wristband. They would sell them for $3 and keep all the profits, right? And so we ended up, for Wounded Warrior Project, we were the largest donor up until a long time. We raised like $3.6 million for Wounded Warrior Project, which is a big amount.
Amazing.
And we spent a lot of time at Walter Reed, Bethesda. And then in 2012, we went to Walter Reed and there was 3 dudes getting treatment, right? So the big surge was over. Back in the mid 2000s, it was chaos in those hospitals. They did an amazing job with the resources they had. I contacted a friend of mine who's on our main page of the website. He just retired as a 4-star general. And I said, Bob, Bob Brown, I said, I just went to Walter Reed. There was 3 guys. What can we do to support the military? I want to do more. And he says, for some, the transition can have some uncertainty. So I contacted Ramit Sethi. I don't know if you know Ramit. Yeah, contacted.
I know he is, yeah.
Gosh, he was a little kid when I met him. He was probably 26, 27 years old. The founder of Allegiant Airlines, Maury Gallagher, Forrest Griffin, the UFC fighter. We had Ben Hugh, the founder of cheeseburger.com at that time. And we went to Fort Lewis, Washington and did an incredible event. And these soldiers in the crowd were like, okay, here's another general officer giving us a PowerPoint briefing, boring. And these guys rocked it. Absolutely. And that was our very first event in June of 2013 on the transition side. Ramit shared some stuff and everyone's like, well, I want to play soldier and shoot weapons and go do this stuff. And that's where it started, right? So we started helping the wounded their families, and then we realized the transition was a game, and who wouldn't want to learn from a Ramit on finances and a Ryan Holiday on stoicism and learning and Grant Cardone on real estate and Brian Kurtz on copy. Like it was incredible what we done. So it evolved into that. And then of course, COVID, we had to cancel a whole bunch of events, unfortunately. And so that's kind of the history of what is, and I've evolved through that process. And I didn't start this, Jeremy, with the idea that I would get to know some of these people that we're talking about. And then I got kind of caught up in it, to be honest with you. Right. And people were calling me going, hey, I want to come speak. And I was like, you're not that important. Right. Like I was looking for the big names, and I realized I missed out on some great opportunities to share, with those going through uncertainty. And by the way, we're always going through transition. Like there's not one transition in our life. We are constantly transitioning. Right. And the one thing I learned through an ADU speaker, his name is Steve Sisler. I don't know if you know Steve. He's an amazing, he would be amazing for your podcast. is how we leave something is how we enter something new. So how we leave the military is how we're going to enter something new. If we have a relationship that breaks up, how we leave that relationship is how we're going to enter the new relationship. And I talk about this a lot in the book. It's like I work with guys and they're fighting with their soon-to-be ex-wife about they're nitpicking this. I'm like, dude, you're going to enter your next relationship with that same attitude. You'll have that little honeymoon phase, and then you're going to fall right back in. So that's really how it evolved. I evolved with it, and it's been a blessing for me, and I've really toned back my face of the organization, and I'm really trying to push it out. And if there are any veterans out there, I'm actively looking for veterans to come join the organization. We have some funding to hire some veterans to take this thing to the next level.
So it started off with the wristbands and then the events, but you do have some online things now. Can you talk about what's available as far as resources go now?
Yeah. So we have a guy named Steve Blank, who not a lot of people know who Steve Blank is. He was an Air Force veteran, never went to college, but he's taken 6 companies public in Silicon Valley. If you look him up, he's worth between 2 and 4 billion. He teaches entrepreneurship at Stanford. And so he gave us his content. So we have on our adulive.org, all these are free resources. You could learn from Steve Blank entrepreneurship, right? You can, let's see here, all those different things you can look at. Resources, become a member, access ADU online. We have Charlie Hone, who's a brilliant author, speaker, worked for Tim Ferriss for I think almost 4 years. And he created a class on how to land a 6-figure job. And he teaches how to create showcases. There you go, right there. Ian Altman, do you know Ian?
I've met him.
He's amazing. And he teaches interviewing and all these type of things. If you just watch that class and Charlie's class, you're gonna create opportunities that you've never seen before. We have some finance classes. We have just some great content on there. It's all free to military, to veterans, to military spouses. And I want to give a shout out to military spouses because they go through a lot. Some of them supporting, their veteran through this whole process. So yeah, great resource out there for everyone to check out.
This is great. And Phil, this is really intricate. How does this get funded? Like, how does it keep going? And there's a lot of moving pieces and resources. I know people are, flying to different events and the online stuff. How do you fund and how could people help out?
Yeah. Well, we definitely accept donations. So the first 15 years of this organization, I solely funded it myself. My wife and I did. We've never taken a salary from this, nothing. And then Dan Sullivan, who you probably know from Strategic Coach, I was in Strategic Coach and he tapped me on his shoulder one day and said, "Hey, we would like to name you as the Game Changer of the Year." And that comes with a donation. So they did an event. And that was our first ever donation, Jeremy, was from Dan Sullivan. Very generous, $150,000 donation. Then we had one of Tony Robbins' companies, Advisors Excel, make a similar donation. And then we had the founder of Sam Adams, Jim Cook, who spoke for us, and he made a donation. Like, incredible. He spoke with John Ruhlin at that event, which we talked a little bit about John Ruhlin before we got on here, who's an incredible individual. And then we've had some just random people, some civilians that I've kind of worked with and coached that have made some nice, generous donations to help support. But yeah, we're a very skinny organization. If you look at our 990s, we post all of our tax returns on the website. It's skinny. So I have some day jobs that fund it as well, cover all the overhead. So yeah, any support would be great, from your audience.
What was your business before that you were able to fund this huge endeavor?
Yeah. Well, I'm still in some of them. So I have a couple day jobs. So I very fortunate, moved to Vegas in 1992. I bought some land. So I've done a little bit of office development. I had a medical billing company from 2001 to 2004. I sold that. That's where I wrote a big check to the foundation. I wanted to kind of direct that. And then I have a health insurance, employee benefits company. I have a little bit of real estate. I have a little coaching program called Clarity Counsel that I love doing. It's kind of a community where people can be vulnerable. And so I have too many chess pieces on my board right now, Jeremy. So, have you ever seen The Queen's Gambit?
No.
Okay, so it's this Netflix show, like 400 million people saw it. It came out, and she's this prodigy. And sometimes I feel like I'm playing chess against her, and she's just toying with me. She's not beating me in 3 moves. She's making me suffer for hours because I have way too many chess pieces on my board, and I have nowhere to move because I got these pawns, so every quarter I have a process through Clarity Council, and we do it at the military is we clear our chessboard and we go, okay, if I put this piece on my chessboard, what does it do to my calendar? What does it do to my health? What does it do to my relationships? Right? It's like Clay Bear's perfect calendar, who he's helped me on this. And I think I think we're spending a lot of time on things that are not serving us, that are annoying and frustrating. It's kind of Joe Polish's elf business. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. It's easy, lucrative, and fun. I have a lot of businesses that are not easy, lucrative, and fun. So I need to learn.
How did you get into commercial real estate?
Random moved to Vegas, was paying rent for one of my day job companies, and this land, I met somebody, and this land opened up here. I had no money. Back in the 90s, you could get credit cards. They would give you offers to like change your balances, right, for 0%. And I literally got $211,000 of credit. That was back when the credit agencies didn't. And I took down this piece of land that I'm still at right now and bought my first piece of land, sold part of it to fund it, put up a building. And that was my first project. And we opened that in 99. And then I've had some projects along the way. Some have been good and some haven't been good.
I'm going to pull this up. Is this the site, Phil, for Clarity Council?
Yeah.
ClarityCouncil.com. Right here. So talk about this for a second. There's a teen program. There's a regular program.
Yeah. So I started this because, I talked about, how we always go to these, Jason Goodard's mastermind talks, and we're with all these incredible individuals, and he's got it so beautifully laid out, and strategic coach and all these things, Dr. Joe. And then we come back to our local community, and we don't have that connection and support. And I believe that the cure for addiction could be any addiction. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be porn, it could be any of those things, is community. And so what I missed when I came back home, I missed that local community. So at Clarity Council, what we do is we connect 4 times a year in person, not in an office, typically out in nature, and really connect. And we do a community service project. We have meals together. Like we have that deep connection. And then what I learned on the teen program, I've worked with well over 1,000 teens, Jeremy, is that all these kids are just trying to be seen, heard, and held, these teens. And so talking to them through, and my kids are all now in their 30s, talking to these teens from a relatable standpoint, and I'm not their dad, right? Like when my dad told me something, I didn't want to do it, so and really understanding where they're at and what their reality is. And I would suggest this to anyone listening to this is, I gain the trust for these teens usually for a couple days or a 3-hour workshop. And then at the end of the workshop, I'll hand an index card to them and I'll say, hey, listen, if you had the courage to tell your parents something, what would you tell them? Write it on this card. Don't put your name on it. Put it in this box. I'll read it, and that'll be the end of it. And Jeremy, I'm in tears when I read these things. Like, Mom, Dad, don't tell me I'm beautiful. Football is your sport, your dream, not my dream. I don't want to go to college. I want to go to beauty school. Like, can you just please listen to me? Right? Like, there's some pain, deep pain in that. And then I'll casually talk to the parents in general about the kids just want to be listened to, not told what to do all the time. And there's some safety issues. I'm not telling parents not to keep them safe. But so that's really how Clarity Council came to be, is have at a local level had that, right? Like you're in Chicago. Probably got some great connections in Chicago, but you meet people all over the country. I mean, I looked at all your podcast guests. I'm like, wow, like it's an impressive list. And I'm sure you talk to them, but that connection locally, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, I like that exercise regardless. I mean, I think I'll see how my kids take to that. I don't, maybe I will say maybe don't, I won't read it, but if they're okay with it. But I love that exercise of just write something down that you wish we should, you would tell us, and you don't have to share it, or you can share it either way, I love that.
And I've done that exercise with adults too. And I've read them, and I'm like reading these things like, oh my gosh, I'm not faithful to you. You should leave me, right? Like there's some pretty scary things that we're just keeping and we're holding into us. And it's like, and this from the chiropractic standpoint, and you understand the body better than most. It's like when we're holding these things in, they can cause disease in our body.
Jim Shields comes to mind when you talk about these things. Talk about Jim. I think he's spoken also.
Oh, a number of times.
Events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has a great process. I'll get it to you for the show notes of, parents. So when kids come home from their day, it's like, oh, how was your day? Fine. Like they're not going to, right, explain anything more than they have to. And he has these great 3 questions. I'll track it down. That's just beautiful, where it's not a yes or no answer. And Jim has really, he has these 18 summers. He has really done a phenomenal job. And he's just a good human. He's just a really good human.
Um, Talk about Missy. I don't know if you talked about Missy yet.
Yeah. So during COVID, we had to pivot online. And so we were doing these 3-week cohorts every month. And we talked about 3 areas, right? Relationships, wellness, and finances, right? In all those categories, you can pretty much put anything in there. And this girl, Missy, just kept showing up month after month, but she never had her camera on. And I finally, like the 3rd month, I'm like, hey, Missy, we'd love to see you, right? Unless there's something that, we couldn't. She put her camera on. She literally was in Afghanistan for 11 months, had a 9-year-old, came back during COVID. Her transition was a handshake with gloves on and a mask and a flag, and said, thank you for your service after 22 years. And she had no community and no connection. And she was very suicidal. And she's written public testimonials on this. She ended up coming to, I think, 7 in a row. She ended up being a volunteer. And she literally sent me a text message one day, Jeremy. And she goes, I just wanted to let you know that yesterday was the first day I didn't think about ending my life after all these years. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I called her, and she goes, I literally forgot yesterday. And it wasn't because of us. It was because she had some community. She had some connection. She heard from others that she wasn't alone, right? And that she could create anything she wanted. Like, I love what you guys are doing about helping people with podcasts. Because some people are like, oh, I just need to get a mic. And like, there's so many other things around that. And I believe that whoever you believe in, God, Buddha, Muhammad, doesn't matter, Earth, God wants you to share your gift. Even if nobody hears it, nobody reads it. So a podcast is a beautiful way just to put it out there, just to get it out there. And you never know who you're going to see. I remember we showed up to a Fort Benning event. We were told 800 people, the theater was going to be packed. We had 100 show up. And for me, I have what's called the I triangle. I have a big fear of failing. I have a big fear of being mischaracterized. And I have a big fear of not being liked. And those were all running unconsciously. So when I walk into this room and I have Grant Cardone and Philip McKernan and all these, Clay Bear, and no one's in the audience, I'm like, oh my gosh. And what I didn't realize at that moment was I thought it was a reflection on me, is that I didn't see who was there. I was seeing who wasn't there. And I think in life, we do that all the time. And everyone has to remember, whether you're helping a company market a great product or doesn't matter what it is. It's not just that individual. When that individual hears something, realizes that it could be a cure if they integrate, then they go home and they have a 10-foot radius at home, Jeremy, and they can be that light at home. Then they go to their office, then they're that light. Then they go to their church or their community and they're that light. All of a sudden now, it's not just that one person. It's generational.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
A huge ripple effect. And so that was a big, right? Because it was my ego, and I got guys like, Grant Cardone. I knew Grant Cardone when I bought him a ticket on Delta. Now he's got some whatever $65 million plane. And he's like, hey, dude, I thought there was going to be 800 people. I'm like, that's what I was told. Right? Like, and he wanted to reach more people. Right? We all want to reach more people. So I don't know if I answered your question, but Missy is such a beautiful human. And yeah, it's been a gift.
Does
Jeremy.
it impact, the community and just being in that community and the learning, that helping that one person really ripples across many people. You mentioned podcasting. You did a great podcast with Joe DeSena.
Yeah.
Talk about maybe his influence a little bit and what you learned from Joe.
Yeah. Joe DeSena is the founder of Spartan Race. He came and spoke a couple of different times. He asked me to be on his podcast, which included a workout. And when you work out with Joe, there ain't no tapping out. And so that was a little brutal. I think I'm still sore from that podcast from a handful of years ago. He is just someone who made a ton of money in the finance world. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start this movement. He was one of the first to start this movement with these obstacle racings and everything. And he is just a great example of somebody who is like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And we can always go back. And even Tim Ferriss, when he spoke, he talks about, you can always get back to where you were. And he did a TED Talk on it, and he talked about it at the military base. We can always come back to where we were, but the regret of not doing it and waiting because we had this fear that no one's going to like it, or people are going to think differently of us, right? And their friends are going to say, what are you doing that? And their parents are going to be like, well, that's not safe, right? You might not make any money. So we still have these, we're talking about conversations in our head, we still have these conversations in our head that we could fail. And how is that going to reflect on us? Listen, no one cares. Another big revelation I had, Jeremy, was I thought people were talking about me, right? I felt like I was so important. And I had this realization is that no one gives a crap about me. Like, you're not going to be thinking about me tomorrow. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I got this thing and I got my family and, my digestion's off. I didn't, have a good bowel movement this morning. Like, you're going to be thinking about everything else but me.
I surprisingly think of my bowel movements more than typical. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Like we all have these, we're concerned about one of our kids. We're concerned about our grandkids. We're concerned about what's happening in the global thing. It's like, we have countries all war and like all these different things. And it's like, we all have our own stuff we're worried about. And when I came to the realization is that I'm not that important and my identity was based on what people thought of me, it was like such a relief. I literally think I lost a whole bunch of weight and like, it was just a relief to not have to perform all the time. Because when you're performing all the time, Jeremy, it's exhausting.
Phil, for people watching the video, talk about what's over your right shoulder there in the picture.
Yeah. So I started my organization in 2003. And in 2004, an NFL football player named Pat Tillman left the NFL. He was in Phoenix, flew to Denver to join the military so no one would know. Him and his brother Kevin joined the military, became Army Rangers. He served one tour in Iraq, a combat tour, was in Fort Lewis, Seattle. His coach, who was his Cardinals coach, was up there and said, hey, Pat, you served honorably. We can get you an honorable discharge. Come play with me at the Seahawks. and you can leave. He's like, I made a 3-year commitment to the Rangers, and I'm going to stick with that community. That plus, 6 weeks later, he was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan. I don't know if you're familiar with that story or not. And when I heard that, I literally flew up to San Jose to be at his memorial service, and it blew me away. My foundation was about a year old, a little over a year old. How someone gives up a wife to go serve the country for 3 years, an NFL career, million. He was offered 1.2 million a year. He says, I'll receive that right at some point in the future. Didn't watch TV as a kid, was wicked smart, graduated in 3.5 years. And so he's been kind of an idol, not an idol, but a role model for me because he didn't tell anybody what he was doing. He just did it. And everyone's like, Pat, you did whatever it was. And so he is someone that I still think about daily.
Yeah, actually, in your podcast about Joe DeSena, he talks about that where he didn't let his kids get a medal at the end of one of the Spartan races. He's like, no, you showing up and doing it's good enough. You don't need that. So
he's a little hard. He's hardcore.
yeah, he's hardcore. Exactly.
He's hardcore. I can imagine the little kids like, I just.
First of all, Phil, I have one last question. I just want to thank you for sharing the stories and the journey and the lessons you've learned. It's been really valuable. My last question, and I want to encourage people to check out American Dream U. That's the letter U.org. That will be linked in the notes as well. My last question is just, you've had some amazing speakers. I know you've been in a lot of different mastermind groups. I'm curious some of your favorite resources, whether it's your favorite books, podcasts, whatever it is. I'd love to hear some of your favorite. I mean, a lot of the speakers you have are authors like Charlie Hone, Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss. What are some of your favorite books that you've enjoyed throughout the years?
Yeah. So Charlie Hone's Play It Away book is amazing, right? He cured a lot of his anxiety through playing. One of my all-time favorite books, Jeremy, is a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. Have you heard of that book?
No.
Oh, it is. He was a priest for 19 years, left the Catholic Church, from India. I got introduced to him in 1992. Tim Ferriss talks about that as one of his top 5 books. So when I met Tim and had a nice dinner with Tim, I asked him about that book, and he's like, that's his go-to. I've listened to that book no less than probably 50 times. It's an easy, short read. Highly, highly recommend it. Ryan's Obstacles of the Way is obviously a classic. And Ryan is one of the most well-read, intelligent young guys I've ever met. Like, I met Ryan when he was in his probably late 20s. Greg McKeown's book Essentialism has been a big one for me as well. Just phenomenal. I've learned from all of them, right? Jordan Harbinger is just wicked smart and such a genuine human being. Just amazing. So again, I have so many different books. Dr. Joe's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Another guy named Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I got to spend some time with. He has a book called The Honeymoon Effect. That is another phenomenal book that some people may not be totally aware of.
He has got a couple books out, I think. I've heard that before, Bruce Lipton.
Yeah, Biology of Belief was his
Yeah.
first one that put him on the map, the whole epigenetics. My suggestion when it comes to book, Jeremy, is find something that you connect with and don't pick up the next audiobook or the next book, including mine, until you've really integrated what you've learned from that book. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, you have some great authors on here. Keith Ferrazzi's books I've enjoyed as well. Never Eat Alone. That's a fantastic one. Dory Clark has a bunch of books as well.
Yeah,
you got a number of authors here.
Yeah, they're all so good, and I hate to pick out one or two, but they're just Joey Coleman has got a great business book. they're all just really amazing individuals. And I've just been really, really lucky to connect with these people. And well, we need to update this because we have a lot of people that we're missing on here. But yeah, that's probably my biggest thing, Jeremy, was I was jumping from one thing to another and just enjoying it and never learning and never integrating what it was. And so a big part of my book and our programs is you got to integrate what you've learned. And it all comes to be awareness, because last thing I'll close with, unless you have any questions, is we're attached to things. We're attached to people. We're attached to outcomes, right? When we hit a target, right, and then we're just so excited we hit this thing. Like I look back at my journals from the 90s and the 2000s, like once I make $8,000 a month and only have to work 40 hours a week and pay off my Subaru, I'll be so happy. And then I have another goal. I keep moving the targets. And what happened was I kept pushing my happiness out to the future, and I realized I'm never in my future. Alan Watts talks a lot about that. He's one of my other amazing teachers who's been gone for a bit. And so just make that decision, right? We all have circumstances we have to deal with, but we have them. And
Yeah, Dan Sullivan talks about in The Gap and the Game. I think several of his books talk about that concept as well.
Yeah. And Dr. Joe talks about a different gap. It's like the way we feel is down here, not worthy, not needed, a burden. And then we have to act a certain way in front of other people to make ourselves look better. And in between that is a whole bunch of things we do for pleasure. We go out and buy something, we take a trip, we go to a mastermind, we do all this kind of stuff to try to make us feel better. And we just keep falling back to the way we feel. It's our default.
Yeah. Phil, thank you. Thanks for sharing these lessons, amazing stories. I know I took a lot of notes here, probably like 10 pages here. So hopefully, I'll just if people are listening, just take one thing that you can go, like Phil said, and integrate. And people can check out AmericanDreamU.org, and we'll see everyone next time. Phil, thanks so much.
I appreciate you, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.